Hello, and thank you for joining us today for our event on accelerating innovation with GKE Autopilot. My name is Lauren, and I'm the content manager for the Google Cloud community. And I'm thrilled to be here today with Satish and Lax, technical account managers at Google Cloud, who will be taking you through the content and answering your questions today. For any questions that you have, please feel free to add them into the YouTube chat box, and we'll be sure to get to them either within the chat or at the end of the presentation. We also had a few pre-submitted questions that we will cover as well. And for any questions that we don't get to, please use the Google Cloud community. You can search for and ask new questions there in different forums on different cloud topics, including GKE, and the link to that is in the YouTube description. Okay, well, I know we have a lot of content to cover today, so I'm going to hand it over to the team to take it away.
Thanks, Lauren, and welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Depends from where you're joining. My name is Satish. I'm a technical account manager with Google, and I'm based in Singapore. I am joined by my colleague Lax.
Yep. Thank you, Lauren and Satish, for kicking things off. So hi everybody. I mean, nice to meet you. So this is Lakshman. I'm a technical account manager with Google Cloud, based out of North America.
All right, thanks, Lax. Moving on. So I would like to welcome all of you for this session on GKE Autopilot. We'll talk about what's the GKE Autopilot. We'll go on a value proposition, and we'll take some of the Q&A. So GKE Autopilot, I want to make a statement, right? The GKE Autopilot really provides you a fully automated, secure, and scalable managed Kubernetes experience, and that comes on the top of our decades of experience. Most of our Google applications, 1 billion users applications runs on GKE. So that's the experience that we are taking to the communities. So that you can focus more on your workload, more on your business, as opposed to focusing on infrastructure management. Now, the premises that we think we need to. I'm assuming that you already using a Kubernetes or let's say Google Kubernetes Engine in a standard mode. So as in a typically, if you are one who using just a Kubernetes services, you will end up managing from a control plane to monitoring management to worker nodes. And if you are using, let's say, being a user of Google Kubernetes Engine, especially the standard mode, you still, I mean, most of the things that will be taken care by GKE in a standard mode. For example, control plane, it already manages. It also provides scaling and downscaling capabilities and its availability and reliability aspect. But as a developer, you're as a user, you're still responsible to manage the worker nodes, provisioning, and infrastructure. So the cluster infra management is still with you if you're a user of a standard mode, as I mentioned. So we thought that there should be a choice. There should be a choice that not all your workload, not your all container workload that are running in GKE really required, maybe 1%, where you really need to have a cluster infrastructure level, configuration or access to. So we introduced this mode of operation, two choices, basically. A choice between flexibility and control, right? So if you're really looking for more of flexibility, more control towards cluster infra management perspective. If your workload demands that, then in that case you can still use your standard mode. But most of the cases, if you really wants to have a hands-off experience, you really think about going for you really still can go for autopilot as such, right? So that's a choice from a mode of operation perspective, and so now question would be what kind of value, right? You really think from a autopilot perspective, right? So from an autopilot, as I mentioned, basically it's a hands-off experience that you can think of. So you can expect a faster time to market if you jump to an autopilot perspective, right? And you can democratize the access of Kubernetes without needing to be an expert, right? And you can reduce your overhead associated to your typically on a day two operation perspective, and so that you can of course focus more on a business and much less on managing the cluster as such, right? And generally, our experience that with GKE Autopilot, you will find that it's 2.6 times faster from a container application deployment perspective, and it takes around the half of the time, right, to get to production, basically. So you're around 45% faster from a time to market perspective. So if you and I think typically the focus is like go you want to launch your feature and function more faster, and I think JK Autopilot helps in that space by expanding or faster time to market, right? You can release you can more focus on that. You can have a more time saving by handing off the infrastructure management, right? And then from a cost perspective, right? Because I think I mentioned the pricing in a JK Autopilot is more on a pod level pricing. So basically, you are paying for what you are using, right? So pay for what you use. So it's a pod based on how many, I mean, based on what your part capacity is, based on how many parts you are using, but you are not worrying about, node capacity or how much wastage is happening on the node. That's all on Google. Sorry, that's all on Google to manage. So you are reducing, you are paying for what you're using, and then at the same time and also reducing on operation cost, because you are handing off the infrastructure and cluster management to Google, right? From a reliability perspective, right? So this we offer workload level SLA. This is the first only Kubernetes service that offers a workload level SLA, right? Backed by Google SRE. Um, from provisioning and scaling perspective, right? So it's all automatically done, right? So you have a better SLO and flexibility, right? The different maintenance to release channel. So those are the options that gives you a more reliable options. And in terms of because we have already had implemented the sensible security defaults and codified the best practices. So we minimize the attack surface areas, right, through the defense in depth approach. So hence, it also a very secure platform, right? In that sense, right? So let's move on to the next one. Now let's dive a little bit deeper from faster time to market perspective, right? What options we have and what can be done here. So from a you are as a customer, right? As a developer, you are still responsible for you want to right size your application, right? That's something definitely on you. But from workload reliability perspective, right? As a Google or Google SRE, we ensure that your part is scheduled and is running. So part level SLA, I mentioned about this, and 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 uh, and we ensure, right, that actually works and isn't crashing. All from your perspective, what is your responsibility would be that you are responsible for your workload. If any wrong code, but as far as a cluster node availability, your pod availability is concerned, we take care of it. But as far as a pod and your code is concerned, that's something lies on your customer side. We ensure your cluster control plane, but also node pools, right? We make sure the node pools and worker nodes are maintained and secured, right? Um, you can use HPA. We have horizontal pod scaling, vertical pod scaling, or even manual scaling, right? You can request more resources, and we provision the infrastructure to make that happen, right? You don't need to worry about as and when you go for HPA or VPA based on how pod, how many pods are getting scheduled, or what's the pod capacity is required. Behind the scene, Google basically we automatically make sure that there's enough infrastructure available to support that, right? So, now bin packing, I think it's a specific area, right? So you're paying for requested resources. You are paying for how many paths you have. You are not worrying about if node has a higher capacity and there is a resource wastage over there. So this is something becomes Google's problem, if you like, right? So you are handing over that problem to us, and we know what to do about it. So bin packing is something that's not an area that you need to worry about. You need not to put your effort time over there, right? So that's on them. So if you look at all these aspects, right, the bottom line is that the scope of what you care about is drastically smaller, right? You care about now your workload, your business. That's what you care about, not the infra, not the cluster management, right? And so let's move on to the next thing. From a node selection perspective, right, there can be a question that you're not involved in a node management perspective, or but you are still allowed to have a node affinity. Your tolerant and taint, those are all still an option. So in traditional managed Kubernetes, you will see that your development and a platform team is separating their task, right? I mean, some platform team is managing node pool resources and hardware and taint configuration, and while your development is of course workload and node selector and tolerant tent. But when it comes down to autopilot, basically you as a platform and development, basically you can utilize both team capacity and capabilities. Just focus on workload. You still have a configuration to make a node affinity or tolerance and taint configuration, so that I mean, even if scenarios are there when you don't need your node to be your parts to be if you want a certain affinity towards one node, or you want a repellent, you can configure. So I have it. So those flexibilities are already inbuilt. You can easily configure that. What kind of whether you want to have anti-affinity or affinity, you want your parts to be part of a certain specific nodes, or it needs to be distributed. I think those all the configurations are possible. Moving on from a so there is one question that definitely pops up, right? While you don't have a cluster and infra management or access to, you are handing off this. The one question is, can I have a say in terms of what kind of compute class I like to use, right? So I think that with Autopilot, right? So the answer for that is 100% yes. You have all variety of you can configure what kind of compute class with GKE Autopilot, what kind of compute class. We have some guidelines for sure, right? If you have a general purpose workload, then what kind of compute class will make more sense. If you have a balanced requirement is more balanced, then what kind of compute class will make more sense. So I think the key thing here to note down, so the scaled out and accelerators as well, but all the way from AI to AI workloads. If you're running AI workloads here, then also you can configure GPUs and all GPUs are available in GPUs as well. So the point being is that based on your workload, despite of not having access to cluster infra or a node, you are still able to specify what kind of compute class based on what kind of workload you want to run. You will have a flexibility, you have a configuration, you have choices to make. So you can configure, so right, and there is a default behavior when we go general purpose, but then you can always specify if your workload needs to, right? From a cost optimization perspective, right? So if you look at the traditional managed Kubernetes, and you have a node-based pricing. So node-based pricing, we talk about you have a workload. I mean, as it's described here, your workload is a clean portion. Basically, it's a depiction in a way that your workload, your node has OS, of course, cluster systems, and then unused capacity. I think one of the biggest area of concern would be the unused capacity, and then an effort from your perspective to see how we can minimize the unused capacity. And can it be achieved? Of course, but it requires an effort, and it requires attention, right? However, when it comes down to autopilot perspective, right, so you see that portion which is something that you really don't care, uh, is gone, and that's where you are using only your workloads. You want to run your pods, you want the capacity, and you are happy to pay for the capacity that you are using, right? So that's where autopilot, having a pod based pricing is makes a lot of sense, right? So and you can just pay for what you use, and you pay for what capacity you are actually using, and that is defined by the way you are running your pod, and what kind of capacity requires for your pod and workloads as such. um, so it definitely makes autopilot more cost effective, right? Given it's a pod based pricing. And operational, I think we have gone through this slide already, but from an operational perspective, right? If you look at that, all bin packing, customer bin packing, demand, you have a demand based, upscaling or downscaling. Your infrastructure is already handed off to be managed by, let's say, the Google SRE team, or automatically. So you, from a day-to-day operation perspective, you are gaining more productivity. You are running your Kubernetes or container or infrastructure. You handed off that, you are running it more operationally efficient. So there is a lot of saving that comes from being very efficient, having hand off the whole infrastructure. So that's GKE Autopilot brings a lot of operation efficiency and productivity gains, and that runs to lowering down the overall TCO, right? Moving on, I think I can. I'll request my colleague Lax to take you on the next couple of slides. Lax.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Thanks, Satish, for giving the brief introduction around GKE Autopilot and how it differs from the traditional one, and how the customers can innovate and scale their workloads and have the better TCO, right? So, and how it is cost optimized, and how it's secure, and how Google does data operations for you. So yeah, having said that, let's move on to the reliability. So there is a study on reliability, when comparing the customers using the standard Kubernetes, and as well as versus autopilot. So here is the graph which shows the difference in the overall cluster health. For example, the one in blue is like autopilot. You see the huge difference that the happy customers are more towards autopilot. If you see as in more like, and comparatively when you use have a standard one, right? So that's what I mean. The same insight that we're trying to highlight, like have better TCO and higher reliability, and the more and more if you use it, I mean, it's like you get more reliable gains as well, because it's all autopilot. I mean, all the features such as security and for example, your reliability engineering stuff, like or node provisioning, such as node scale and scaling aspect as well, and maintenance of node, and all the stuff's taken care. So overall, you might gain 90% improvement in reliability. So let's move to the next one, the security aspect of GKE Autopilot. So before that, I would like to take a step back and see how you do the security in your standard GKE mode, right? So always when without, let's take the autopilot out of the equation, you see the huge difference in how the securities are handled by our Google SRE when you enable the autopilot. For example, the basic security features such as the hardening, right? We have a GKE hardening clusters guidelines, which is the details are given in the documents below. So all the hardening configurations are provided by you for a default. You don't need to spend time, or security engineers or SREs don't need to spend time on this, right? It's all given to you by default. So you just need to worry about whether my clusters and nodes are security or hardened as per the GKE security postures. So I would love to go through some of the options here. Like what are the securities, that GKE Autopilot does it by default, so that, you can save time and effort and focusing on developing the applications and innovating for your customers, instead of, spending time on infrastructure management, such as node provisioning and all those stuff. So for example, the Autopilot has some pod security standards, which is given by default, which is like privileged, baseline, and restricted. So for baseline is something, something that's been given due to default. So Autopilot give you this Kubernetes pod security standard as baseline as a default option for you. So in that case, if it is baseline, what it does, right? So Autopilot, it's all goes into the OS level now. So host process will be blocked. So you cannot have access to your, guest OS host process, host namespaces, and privileged containers, right? Some kind of privilege, so that it can modify the operating system or root of the operating system on its own. So privileged containers are disabled by Autopilot by default, and there are a lot of Linux capabilities, security Linux capabilities as well, which is like being taken care by Autopilot. And for example, another one is sysctl commands, right? So GKE does not set those commands. That will be possible only with Autopilot by default, and volume types that is in the restricted policy, right? So Autopilot doesn't allow like all the volumes types, so it has to have some restrictions. So it does not allow you to mount any devices or any devices to the pod. So there is always a restriction comes with that. And run as a non-root, that is one of the privilege that comes with the default. And run as non-root user. So either you can choose to run as non-root user, or non-root or run as non-root, right? These are the two other options. Like these are the part of securities, features that's given by GKE Autopilot by default. Another one, I mean, the list is huge, but yeah, for example, GKE managed namespaces. So it doesn't allow you to deploy into GKE managed namespaces such as systems, kubectl, and all the stuff. And it's always ensure the container isolations. That is also handled by default. The list is endless. Pod level security and policy enforcement, such as pod security, gatekeeper, policy controller, are all supported by Autopilot, right, by default. And let's talk about few other, lockdown nodes, right? The next one is lockdown nodes. What does it mean, right? So here your nodes are locked down. What does it mean? That you don't have an option to go into the nodes and have access to the nodes where the pods are running. The nodes are locked down. It's taken care by Google SRE. So you don't worry about the node infra management, as we discussed earlier, right? Like node provisioning, scaling like HPA, VPA, all the scalings are all taken care by Google. So you don't need to worry about anything around the nodes management or node infrastructure management. Again, infrastructure security is Google responsibility. It's patches, for example, nodes, for example, your cluster are many nodes, and nodes operating systems updates, and all those things are taken care by GKE SREs, our Google SREs, instead of you focus on. So you can see how much time you save, by going secure by default if the customers are enabling GKE Autopilot. So more information is given in the link below. Please feel free to take a look at it or bookmark it when you get a chance, and that have all the whole list of features that I have discussed. So that's the benefit, right? So one more thing I would like to highlight, Google recently announced Autopilot is your recommended and the default option when you try to spin up the Google Kubernetes engine. Autopilot is coming as a default option for you. We made it default in the month of August, so that shows how much Google is giving importance and focusing more on autopilot, right? So another one. Next is, what are the workloads, right? When you say workload, so you say that, the question is pretty normal in anybody's mind. Like when you say you lock down our infrastructure management of nodes, and how do we ensure that, all the workloads are possible? So as we already mentioned, 99% of the workload which you run in a standard Kubernetes GKE, it's all possible with GKE Autopilot. For example, stateful workloads, which was which was not designed initially, and then we are supporting that also, stateful workloads. So there was a workaround, when you start off with stateful workloads, but now the stateful workloads also possible with GKE Autopilots. And stateless app, which is pretty much, all know about it, right? Which is like microservices, which is where the container is born. You run your application into microservices, and stateless application is possible, which is like almost most of the customer for running any 3D e-commerce web applications and all those stuff, all stateless, which is based on the microservice architecture. So that is supported by Autopilot. And long running batch jobs, right? Let's say you want to run a batch jobs, and that is also possible with this Autopilot. And GPU based, right? For example, in this era of generative AI, you want to run some AI and ML workloads on Autopilot. Again, yeah, that is also possible with GPU based workloads. And ARM based architecture is also possible with GKE Autopilot. So again, this is all made possible with the possibility of compute class, which my colleague Satish had defined earlier. You might say that, hey, I don't have an option to choose my compute, right? So that's why there is a whole new concept called compute class has been introduced to make sure you get access to the GPUs, for example, or you want to have a balance of price and performance. You have those workloads possible in the compute class sections, right? So, and for example, ARM architecture, again, yeah, that's the scale out compute classes. So you can pick and choose your workloads, and you can specify those configuration in the file, a YAML file, where in a compute class configuration, you can choose that. And it's, again, so it doesn't mean that, what doesn't mean that it supports almost like 99% of the workloads that the GKE, standard GKE supports. Again, yeah, let's move on to the next slide. Yeah, I think, so maybe a quick summary of what we discussed on GKE, standard GKE versus Autopilot. Maybe I can give a quick round of summary, then we can take up the questions questions for this pre-submitted questions for this session. So Autopilot, again, Google SRE takes care of all your day two operations. When you set up the node clusters, you don't need to worry about, you just need to specify the node names and where region you want to deploy, and that's it. And maybe you want to have a public or private cluster. So these are the three parameters you see when you set up those Autopilot in console. In relatively, if you're going to set up those same GKE clusters in standard mode, you have to choose your specify your scaling limits, and you need to specify the sizes of what sizes of the machines, and all those sizing of the machines, and all those being taken care automatically. And again, node maintenance windows all taken care by default, and node provisioning is different, and scaling and scale out, again, you have to do it if you're preferring to go for standard one, and Autopilot does take care of it. For example, as my colleague mentioned, the bin packaging is also possible, so you don't need to spend more time on the bin packaging and make sure your resources are well utilized. Bin packing is done by us, so done by Google SREs, so it's so that you can efficiently run your applications on GKE. So you can scale it without worrying about cost, because it's all pod-based pricing. It's not like node level pricing, so you just pay what you use for your per level, right? You resource what you use. Again, yeah. So I think pretty much what it does, right? It improves your innovation. It reduce, it increase your return on investment or IO, and total. I mean, yeah. Overall, I mean, GKE Autopilot is the way to go. I mean, when you worry about, when you just focus your app developers to focus on the application development rather than managing the infrastructure. I mean, you leave the jobs to Google's. The SRE is the best in the world. I mean, who had contributed more to the Kubernetes space, and yeah, the Autopilot will do the magic for you.
Okay, with that, let's dive into some of your questions. So our first question that we have is, what noted benefits do software engineers see when using GKE Autopilot?
Okay, probably
Yeah, Satish, you want to go? Yeah, go ahead.
Sure, I can take to that, and I think it goes to what value proposition that we were sharing on Autopilot. So one of the key thing is it lets you focus on your workload on your business, and offloads the whole cluster management and infrastructure. So faster time to market is a key pillar. That's something that is the gives the benefit. And as an organization, and given the economic situation, everybody is behind saving the cost wherever they can. And what is the best way to say that? Okay, you are paying for what you're using, and you are saving your productivity, you're increasing your productivity, and you're saving your effort from bin packing and those kind of things as well, right? So reduce the cost. So first thing is faster time to market, and second is your cost. And third, best practices, best policies, security to its depth is already built in and designed in Autopilot. So I think that's a third aspect that you will look for, right? And fourth, we are saying basically that you can run any workload. It's still Kubernetes, right? And you have a choices to configure what kind of workload you want to run. So you are still having a choice to select what kind of workload, and based on what kind of compute class. So you have flexibility. You can run all 99% of Kubernetes workload, that container workload that you're running on Kubernetes, can be run on GKE Autopilot. So as a software engineer, I think these are the 3-4 parameters that you will look after, and the Autopilot brings that to you, right?
Fantastic. All right. And as we're going along, if you have any additional questions, feel free to add those into the chat. So one here that we have is, I would like to set a static IP address to some egress traffic coming out from GKE Autopilot to some third-party managed service, such as MongoDB Atlas. I could not find a documentation explaining this in GKE. How would you do this?
I'm happy to explain. This is a larger question in terms of how exactly needs to be done. There's a documentation that I can share, but primarily GKE ingress NAT policy allows you to configure a IP microstate behavior in Autopilot cluster, right? You can manage. You have a two different type of our ingress NAT policies managed by GKE, and that are fixed and not editable. But then we have also default policies that are editable. So that gives you a choice to do you can configure your IP masquerade behavior, how exactly it should be. In terms of a link, we can share the link. Lauren, we can share the link right here. So but also please feel free to ask this question on community as well. We'll provide the more detailed response. But I just you can refer this particular link as well for this. Yeah, this is a bit detailed, but yes.
Perfect. Thank you. And yep, you can see that link in the chat. And thank you for your questions. We'll go on to the next one just now, and then we'll get to those in the chat. So can you use Elasticsearch with GKE Autopilot?
Satish, you can go ahead, or?
Sure, go ahead, Lex.
Okay. No. Okay. So, I mean, there are two parts to this question. So if I'm right, so Elasticsearch is, can you deploy Elasticsearch on GKE Pilot, or can you access Elasticsearch with GKE Pilot? So we need some clarification around that question, Lauren. Maybe if it's somebody who had asked is please provide more information around that in the community chat or whatever it is. We're happy to provide more detailed answer. But let me try to answer the first part. Deploying Elasticsearch on GKE Autopilot is possible. I mean, there is a blog links available. We'll share it in the later. But other thing is, are we able to access the Elasticsearch from GKE Autopilot? So that is something we need to know more specific so that we can answer about that question. So Satish, if you have any points around that, feel free to add it.
No, I think you pretty much covered. I think we need clarification. But if I assume that this question is more about can we run Elasticsearch on GKE Autopilot, the answer is yes, straightforward. And we can share the link as well in terms of how we can configure it. Yeah.
Yep.
Sounds good. All right, we're going to just jump over to the question from the chat here. So is there any metrics for cost comparison between standard and autopilot?
Okay, I'll take this question, but I mean, okay, so we have a internal matrices where it depends upon your workload as well, right? Your configuration and many other aspects. I mean, we just shared with you in general, we see the 85% cost reduction, cost of operation reduction from a standard workload. If you're running a pretty standard workload, this is what we observe. In some of the environment, my own customer experience is we go anywhere from 40% saving to 80% saving. Again, as I said, it depends upon workload. It varies from that. But one thing I can assure you, or basically definitely my experience is you have a lot of, as I said, you can achieve anything from 30-40% to all the way 70-80% type of saving when you're running with GKE Autopilot. Yeah.
Makes sense. All right, thank you for your question. Okay, so I believe this is our second to last question. So it's a bit lengthy, so I'll just kind of summarize it here. But is it possible to run a packet capture in an autopilot cluster? And is it possible to allocate additional RAM to the cluster nodes in autopilot mode?
Yeah, I'll take that question. Maybe Satish can chime in as well. So the question is packet capture, right? So we don't have access to that nodes. So that's why we said the nodes are, we are like, nodes are always, blocked for your visibility. Even in console, you don't have access to the nodes, right? So it's not possible to run a packet capture or anything, a troubleshooting or logging into nodes. Those are not possible with autopilot because it's completely taken over by Google SREs to make sure, ensure that there is no attacks or any security, more of a private security issues and security reducing the attack surface area. So again, anything related to troubleshooting, anything all taken care by our SREs. If your nodes have any problems, we will do that by default. But unfortunately, it's not possible with somebody who's using the GKE Autopilot. Let's say they want to do the packet trace or packet capture. It's not possible in GKE Autopilot. Satish, your insights?
No, I think it's a trade-off, right? I think whole presentation we mentioned that you are handing off infra and cluster management to Google SRE, and hence, as and when you really need such things, you can reach out to our of course our support to Google SRE team, and they will be happy to assist. I've been to such issues discussion in the past as well, including your RAM. I understand that you get to select the compute class, but in terms of adding more RAM, and if you think that's a kind of, because again it's a thought process in terms of whether it will solve our problem or not. But one line statement: Google SRE is responsible for infra and cluster management, and you can reach out to them, and they will provide this if this is deemed necessary to solve your problem. Yeah,
makes sense. Okay, great. So this is our last question. If you have any additional, please feel free to drop them in. But this will be the last one that we take for today. So Compute Engine has a number of quotas, such as CPUs, CPUs per region, etc. Do those specifically mentioned quotas affect GKE Autopilot as well? I didn't see anything precisely around those items in the documentation. So if a project is limited to 24 CPUs in Compute Engine, will GKE Autopilot hit that quota, for example?
So GKE Autopilot is also subjected to project label resource control. As such, we sorry, is it? I thought I answered the question. It is subjected to project level configurations. Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Perfect. Okay.
You did, Satish. Yeah.
Okay. Great. So with that, we have just one additional question. Is there a demo or tutorial video content of setting up some cluster with GKE Autopilot?
Well, it was so easy that I thought I'll skip it. So it's very easy. Actually, it's very, very easy. In fact, if you have public endpoints, it's much easier. Otherwise, primarily you provide your subnet. But it's just that contain cluster name, and you just provide
Just
your
three fields. Yeah, just only the three fields.
provide your subnet, and your cluster is ready. So unlike and that's where this experience coming picture is simpler. It allows you to focus on what you do best, which is coding and deploying your workload. So um, yes, there are, of course, and it can be done from a console. It can be done, of course, from command line, scripting. It's all possible. We I'm not sure, maybe, but we can. It's not right now in my or in front of me, but otherwise I can share. There are various demos that we have done on that, and it's already available online, so you can refer to that
Yeah.
too. Yeah.
Yeah, Satish, I have seen a lot of videos on Google Cloud Tech. There is a separate channel, Google Cloud Tech, where you see a lot of videos on how to set up clusters with GK Autopilot in comparison with the standard mode. So you can see the difference, like how many minutes or how long that takes to set up the autopilot in the standard versus standard GKE versus GKE Autopilot. I mean, yeah.
Great. Yep. And the Google Cloud Tech YouTube channel is a great resource for additional demos and walkthroughs that you can check out. So thank you for the question, and best of luck deploying and setting up your cluster. Awesome. Well, that is all the time that we have for today. If you do have any additional questions, we do encourage you again to make sure you're utilizing the community. And again, here are a few of the additional resources that we have shared. And we'd love to see you at one of our other upcoming events if you are interested. Oh, team, we just have one more question if we're open to addressing it. So thank you for this. Will GKE Autopilot support direct VPC egress in the future similar to Cloud Run direct VPC egress?
VPC egress. So I would love to know some specifics, like is there any examples, like what they're trying to achieve? They want to connect from the GKE Autopilot. Are they going to talk to any other application? What is that specific? Because there are a lot of workarounds available. For example, one of the static IP address questions, right? We shared that is kind of workaround. So maybe, yeah. We would like to know more specifics, Nandika and Vijay. So if possible, if you could share that now, we can try to answer that. But before that, maybe Satish, if you have some insights.
This is okay. So I can't comment more from product management perspective, but I see there's a value, and I'm sure our product team will love to take this kind of feedback and then build this in as part of the future roadmap of GKE Autopilot. So happy to hear more use cases, maybe put on a community, and whenever we take this kind of when we have the scenario like this, we would take to our product management, And of course, we have a whole process of prioritizing, but certainly if this is something important to you, and then definitely it's important to us, we can look to add it in our future roadmap. Yeah.
Exactly. Awesome. Yes, all of your feedback and questions are always helpful for us to continue to improve and understand what matters most to our customers and our end users. So really appreciate the time that you took to join us today. And thank you so much, Satish and Lax, for the presentation and the information. This is recorded, so you can always come back and rewatch and relearn some of the information that we covered today in case you missed anything. Thank you so much again. Do you have any final thoughts or recommendations before we close out today?
Yes. Yeah, we have. I mean, I can go first. Yeah, I mean, so as the same point that I have highlighted earlier, like Google had made Autopilot as your default option. I mean, since November 2023. So that shows the importance how Google is valuing the power of Autopilot related to the traditional GKE, standard mode. So again, I mean, so yeah, we've been repeating the same thing again and again, like, Google SREs are the best. I mean, blowing our own trumpet, but that's the truth. I mean, might know that Kubernetes was mostly contributed by Google, and GKE is the mostly widely used, orchestration system around the world. So you are in the best of best hands. So I mean, enable the Autopilot and innovate more, and that's it from my side. Yeah.
Awesome.
No, thanks to everyone for joining, and it's always a pleasure to share the experiences, share this learning, and also get some feedback. So I think that's great, and I think I can't agree more. Autopilot, I myself been part of a couple of journeys. My clients and customers adopting Autopilot, and they could see the value. And as I think one of the point that we mentioned, that now we have made this as a standard, basically a default mode of operation. So we have this standard mode and Autopilot. We, after all the feedback and after all the benefit that we see across our customer base, we now decided to make it as a default mode of operation, unless you really think that you really need to go for a standard mode of operation, right? So please you can always, you have an option, of course, you can choose. But I think there's a reason behind why we gone with the default mode as Autopilot. So I think please experiment, please try, and we are always here to see your feedback. So with that, thank you very much, and thanks for joining this session. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you, everyone. Thanks again, Satish and Lax, and we hope to see you next time. We hope you have a great rest of your day, evening, or wherever you are in the world. Appreciate it.